to the Bro4 Squad podcast. I'm your host, Matt Geiger, and joining me today is the mad scientist, Brian Banner, and the Incredible Hulk's personal trainer, Jeff Hornacek. And boy, oh boy, do we have a show for you. You know it's a huge show when Banner has his shirt on. We have always wanted to be unique here at the Bro4 Squad in giving our fans, or the fifth chair, as we would now like them to be known, something unique that they couldn't find on any other podcast. Now, the movie we would like to discuss today is Comix, spelled C-O-M-I-X, Beyond the Comic Book Pages, which, as I can best describe it, is a documentary / origin story on how comics got their start in the United States, all the way to how they're still affecting pulp culture today. Now, in the movie is a Mount Rushmore of comic book writers, artists, etc., among the likes of Stan Lee from Marvel, of course, Frank Miller, my boy, from Sin City, 300, and The Dark Knight Returns, Mike Richardson, Dark Horse Comics, Neil Adams, who wrote for Batman Superman for quite some time, and Mark Silvestri from Image Comics, such comics as Spawn, and they did The Crow for a while. Now, not only is this the topic of our chest day, but we also have an extra special spotter guest. Michael Valentine, who wrote and directed the movie, joins the podcast. And Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm excited to be on the show.
And we got some questions for you coming up. Now, on the show, we state all the time that even if you're a comic book fan, some things you just aren't into. For instance, Doctor Strange was never for me, but Batman was. Now, after all three of us has watched your film, which we enjoyed so much, we each watched it multiple times. But I want to say not only is Michael's film for people like us that love comics, grew up with comics, and still collect them, if you're a person that's never read a comic but is still goes to these movies because you want to see the blockbuster of the summer, you still need to check out this film. It is the evolution of everyone's favorite superhero. In the film, DC is discriminated. Marvel is there. Star Wars is there. Image Comics is there. Anybody that you think is a superhero is in this man's film. But being the DC voice of this show, I don't want to hog the ball too much, so I'll throw it to our Marvel man and our Fox guy. So, Jeff, I know we all have questions for him. Why don't you kick it off for us?
We do. Michael, thanks again for coming on. It's kind of a cool thing for us, especially after we saw the film. It's like you get to meet one of your newly found heroes after the work you did kind of representing all comic book fans. So I guess the first thing I want to ask is, the name is really unique, Comix with an X, and obviously the work you did took quite a while to do. So how did you come up with the name, and then what was your inspiration? Because I know you worked on this for over a decade, 13 years. That's like 13 times longer than my longest relationship. So how did you keep that work going for so long?
We took 13 years just to try to get laid, and this guy took 13 years actually used it to something cool and made a movie about it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, most relationships don't last that long, right? So
Women.
I've had a really good relationship with this film, and when I was a kid, we talked earlier about this. I love comic books. I'd stop home. I'd stop on my way home from school, and I would read comic books at the 7-Eleven and drink slurpees and get brain freeze, and it was great memories. And so I always wanted to draw. I was a big Neil Adams fan, big John Romita Jr. fan, big John Byrne fan, and I always wanted to draw comic books, but I never was the best at it. When you look at people like that, and then you try to draw, and you're like, nah, this is just not cutting it.
Right. You can watch Jordan shoot a jump shot, but when you go out there, it's not going to be the same thing.
So I love comics all my life. So about 14 years ago, I decided that I wanted to make my own comic book. But it's not that easy. Anybody who thinks it's easy to make a comic book, it's not. I mean, hey, you've got to have a really great story.
Right.
That's the key. And you have to have good character development and characters that people really can identify with. And then, you have to find a really good artist, unless you're the artist, and I'm not. So it was really important for that, to find that. So what happened was over time, I was doing a lot of research, and I was going to some of these local conventions here in LA, and I just saw this world that, where fans could go up and meet their heroes. They could go up and get autographs. They could, have the artist kind of, look at their work, and it was just this really magical world that I never really realized was there. And again, this is late 2003, early 2004, and it just came off like a light bulb. I was like, this is what I was meant to do. Because, I always love documentary filmmaking. It's, as much as I love the blockbuster comic book movies, for me as a fan, I always wanted to see something about the people who created all these characters, you know what I mean? And created these comic books, because everybody watches the movies and do they ever think about, where these characters came from and who were the people who created them? So that's kind of the way I started shooting. I went to conventions and I started interviewing anybody who would want to talk to me. And that's kind of the way it all started.
That's the one thing I really like to touch on your film is whenever you talked about making comics, is that whenever I watched your film, the one thing I did not know is the step-by-step how the comic actually hit the shelves, where, the writer writes it and then the artist draws it, but then you have inkers and you have shaders, and then after everything's done, the publisher has to say, yes, this is good, send it out. And it's just such a teamwork, and, the writer, the Stan Lees and the Frank Millers get all the credit, but I never even realized how the inkers and the shaders and all these people play such a role in it that, man, this would not even look cool to me or visual to the eye if these guys didn't have their job and were very well at their job. So that's one thing that I really took away from your film that I didn't even know to start off with.
Well, that's great that you caught on to that, because, the film, one of the main things I wanted to do with the film was I didn't want it to be about, I didn't want it to be a documentary just on Stan or on DC or Marvel or, any of the history of comics. I wanted to try to make this film about everything, try to include little bits and pieces of all the different parts of the phenomenon that's made it what it is today. And, collaboration is key. Whenever you're making a comic book or a movie or anything, it really is key. And you're right. I mean, the Stan Lees and the Frank Millers get all the credits, but, it's the editor. I mean, a good editor is key on a good success of a comic book, you know what I mean? And everything has to go through him at the end. And so if that comic book goes out and there's a misspelled word or there's something wrong, it's his job on the line, because all that time that the artist spent, penciling these pages, all the time that the writer spent, writing this great story and kind of working with that penciler, and then all the work that the inker did, and all the work that the colorist did, and all the work that they did with the words and the logos and all that, everything, and then it goes to the press, all that comes down to one guy, and that's the editor. So it's the collaboration point is really key with comic books, for sure.
Now, Jeff talked about this 13 years to make this film, which shows, because we've seen all the great comic book films that were awesome, took a while to make, and this is no different. But you talked to us before the show that you had over 350 hours, I believe, of footage. So how did you decide not to, as the DC fan in me, call it Suicide Squad it, and not leave your best work on the cutting room floor and know how to cut through the fat, as I could say, of 350 hours of work in, I believe it was about an hour and a half film. So how did you decide to do that?
Well, when it's your passion project, everything is good stuff. You know what I mean? You want everything in the film. And you just can't do that. If everything was in the film, it would have been a 4 or 5 hour film. And
right.
I would totally watch the director's cut.
That's fine.
I would watch the director's cut of that in a heartbeat.
And me too. I mean, that's the fan in me. And again, that's the beauty of this industry, and that the real comic book fans are going to love it, and the people who are kind of just getting into it are going to love it. So, going back to your question, it wasn't that easy. But I had a really good editor, and him and I sat down and we really went through all the footage. I went through all the footage myself, and I labeled all the clips that I really liked, and I gave it to him, and I said, "Here's my film." And he goes, "Dude, this is going to be like a 4 hour film." And I'm like,
and?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I still don't understand the problem.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm like, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
He just said, you know what, let's whittle it down. So we worked really hard to kind of get it down to an hour and a half, and it's tough. It's your baby, so everything is important. But the great thing is that the DVD, if people are interested, the DVD is really special because all that extra stuff, all that extra good stuff that you would want to see is there.
Yeah.
I know we have people interested right now, so why don't you share to us where can we purchase this fantastic DVD of the origin story on how comics hit the U.S. and how it's still involved in pop culture today?
Well, they can go to my website. It's probably the best place. It's a central location. It's available, on a lot of different platforms, digital platforms and DVD. It's on Amazon Prime and all those places. But probably the best place for people to go is my website, which is comicsthemovie.com. That's COMIX, themovie.com, because there's links to everything there. But if they just Google Comix, COMIX, beyond the comic book pages, they'll find it too, which is really great.
Michael, what I really took out of your documentary here is that this is truly a film for the fans, made by fans. This isn't you sitting down saying, hey, Stan, here's my question. Will you answer it? This is Stan and you just talking, and then it is filled with so many other fans out there. 60%, 75% of the movie is just you talking to people at Comic-Con, which is just like, it's just like you talking to one of the bros here. It was phenomenal. That was what I really took out of it, is that you truly are a huge fan of what you're doing, and you brought that out in the movie and can show everybody what it's all about.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and it was important for me to do that. I mean, I've seen so many documentaries where, the filmmaker is in a lot of the documentary. I don't like that. I've seen a lot of films where the film is narrated by someone who probably doesn't know anything about what they're talking about, I've seen some different films, comic book documentaries.
Let's get Morgan Freeman in here and have him narrate this for us.
Andy Dufresne.
That was spot on.
I was just trying to figure out how many times.
I made a pact not to bring up Joel Schumacher anymore on this podcast.
God. I don't
check out our Batman and Robin commentary, by the way.
Yeah. No thanks. And the funny thing is, I started on this film in 2004, so really at that time there wasn't really, to me, what I was out there wasn't anything like it. And so it was really important for me for the people in the film to tell their story, not me. So I really was, conscientious of the way I asked questions and the story I wanted to tell. But, again, it was really key for them to tell the story of this phenomenon, whether it's Stan talking about creating Spider-Man or Fantastic Four, or Frank Miller talking about Sin City, or a fan talking about making their costume or how much they love going to the conventions. The last thing people want is to see me say, oh, conventions are great and you should go. No, they want to see the fans. They want to see people who are passionate, you know what I mean? Like us.
Yeah.
And what's the saddest part for me is I carry the DC flag on this show, but I'll have to say that Bob Kane's not with us anymore, and Frank Miller is spectacular. I love him. But my favorite part of this is seeing Stan Lee describe how Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were gambles to him, and the publisher did not want to go with them. And he went with his gut and went with them, and they were his two biggest hits. I was almost just crying and be like, oh, man, I'm always for DC, but that's such an awesome Marvel story. Stan Lee is the godfather of comics, man. He is so fantastic.
Yeah, and the great thing with Stan is that he pays homage to the people who helped him out too.
Absolutely.
He talks about Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and Romita and all these people, and that's the great thing. And when you're a filmmaker, it's awesome because you go in, to do an interview with a set of questions you want to ask. But the great thing is when you start talking to them, again, just like talking to how we're talking here, they start getting excited, and a lot of times things come out and they talk about things that are unexpected, and those are some of the best parts to me of this film. There's a great part of the film where Frank Miller and Neil Adams are talking about how
that was so cool.
Yeah, Frank. I said, and I didn't even know this story, so I'm talking to Frank, and I said, Frank, I was just asking him who are some of the people who you looked up to, And he mentioned some people, and then he mentioned Neil Adams. He started telling the story about, when I first started, I went to Neil Adams because, he was one of these artists that I truly admired. and Neil Adams just told him how bad his work was and that he stunk and he
Yeah.
should give it up. Can you imagine telling Frank Miller that his stuff stinks?
Right.
See, coming from a diehard Frank Miller fan, I can believe that, because all the comics I saw, and that's why I'm such a different kid, is that I love The Dark Knight Returns, but it is like, I bought it actually when I went to New York to visit Jeff, and when I bought it and rebought it, I said, man, this is nothing. I still remember when I was 6 years old, I said, this is nothing like I've ever seen before. It's not pretty. It's not, the lines aren't drawn perfect. It's gritty, and there's a lot of people that's like, man, this isn't good. This artist isn't good. But for me, there's something that drew me to it. I said, man, this is gritty. This is grounded. This speaks to me, finally. I read a lot of Marvel stuff. I liked it. But that's what really got me into DC, is reading The Dark Knight Returns. And Frank Miller got me believing in DC, and I'm really glad that he's definitely a part of a lot of the comic book movies that are happening in Hollywood right now.
So kind of piggybacking off of what Geiger had said there is the three of us have drastically different opinions on what makes a good comic book. So can you help us break a tie and tell us what in your opinion makes a great comic book?
Well, I mean, it's like any art form. It's like everybody probably has their own idea of what attracts them. So I don't know if there is a right answer to that question. I can only tell you what, to me, draws me. And, it's great artwork. I mean, it doesn't have to be the superhero artwork. It can be, especially nowadays, there's so many different types of comics out there. And, you guys were mentioning Frank Miller and his Batman Dark Knight. I mean, that was not as pretty as, Neil Adams' Batman stuff, but there was something to it. And so I think artwork is obviously important, but the most important thing is a good story and good characters. I mean, if you've got that, to me, then, because you can look at a cover and go, oh my God, that looks awesome, right? But then you start reading it, and you're like, well, this is okay. You're probably not going to continue to read it, right? So I think the artwork will hopefully grab you, but I think what's going to sustain you is a good story and great characters. To me, that's what makes a good comic book to me.
Piggybacking off that and going back into your movie, and we hit.
You can't piggyback off my piggyback. That's illegal.
I'm piggybacking off everyone's piggybacking.
Look, if playground rules aren't in effect, this is anarchy, and I quit.
This is nuts. Then.
We'll pop the frog later, but we talked about Star Wars are in this movie, DC's in this movie, Marvel's in this movie, Image is in this movie, but there's a lot of independent comics that are in this movie that after I watched this, I said, man, we're an independent podcast. We're not backed by anybody. We do this because we love it. We need to go out and support these independent comics because, some of them are good. Some of them might not hit you, but there is some talent out there because at the end of the day, Stan Lee was an independent comic when he started. Everyone started somewhere. We need to go out to these comic book stores that are hotter than ever right now, and instead of going to the Marvel section, the DC section, and read these comics that we read millions of times, we need to go to the independents and pick these up, pay money for them, and support these people because there's people out there that in your movie, they're not making a dime off doing this. It's probably actually costing them money.
Yeah.
But we need to go out there and support them because they're very artistic. They're very driven. They have great stories, and they're coming up with something new that who knows, man. Once they hit in 15 years, our kids could be seeing this, on Thursday night, or probably by then, was it going to be, Michael, Tuesday night openings on the movies? They're going to go on Tuesday night at midnight to go see these films. But support your independent comics. That's what I got from your film as well, that we need to support these independents for sure.
Well, thank you for that. And I knew that going in. I mean, when I first started going to the conventions, it was great because they have an area where it's all the independent creators and writers and artists, and I'm just like going, holy crap, there's so much really cool stuff here. So I wanted to make sure. I mean, I had to put Marvel and DC in there because that's what people associate comic books with, for the most part. But to me, the most important part is the future to me of comic books is in the independents because. Yes. I mean, how much more can we do with Superman and Batman? And we keep, they can do some good stuff, but I mean, eventually, you need to, it's going to have to go to the independents. And, that's why I like a movie like Sin City, or I liked a movie like Hellboy, because, they find, these characters. And I was really happy to have Steve Niles, who does horror comic books, because people may or may not even realize that horror comic books are really
Oh, yeah.
popular, but it's a niche that a lot of people don't even associate with comic books. So the independent publishers and these artists and creators, they're key, and we need to support them for sure, because they're like us. You guys are independent, I'm independent, they're independent. We support each other, and because that's kind of, to me, the future where comics is going to be.
Michael, kind of playing off that, sorry, I'll jump in. Some of the best stuff in this were some of the anecdotes that we got, like the Neil Adams one. And then another thing that I thought that actually was really inspirational to me was the analogy of comics, I think right before the Silver Age hit, were so kind of on the precipice of something big and breaking edge that they were actually like proposed to be banned in a lot of places, similar to rock music was the analogy that you made in the film, which I didn't even realize, and is crazy to think about me being a kid not being able.
Comics were like Elvis Presley shaking hips, man.
Yeah.
Parents did not want them to see him, and that made it more cool, didn't it?
And well, the thing I was wondering was, I took that as actually a very inspirational part of the movie. Like, thank God these people, these creative minds fought to keep this in pop culture and in our, in just sort of in our commonplace, because it was such a big part of, I think, all of us growing up. So I was wondering if that was planned on your end to kind of make that a very inspirational part of the movie, or if you were just sort of trying to tell this history, because that was something I had no idea about the first time that I saw this film.
I think some of the best parts of the film were not planned. You go in and you do what you think is right and what you want, but then when you start talking to the people, like Mark Waid is an insane writer. The guy is one of the best. If you're a DC fan, go out and check out Superman Birthright. It's the best Superman, in my opinion, especially in recent years. So it's one of those things where some of it was planned, some of it wasn't. That really wasn't planned. And the great thing is that, when I went in, I was like, okay, I want to do this documentary on comic books, and I want to do all this, got all these great people. I never really planned on it being inspirational. And it's one of those things where, you have these happy accidents that happen, and I couldn't be more prouder of those moments like you're talking about, because, they're not me inspiring you. They're the people who have done it or have knowledge of the people who have done it, and they're telling you about the way things were. I mean, comics were, at one point were going to be banned, and it was like you guys were saying about music, the PMRC, the comics book code, and and there's a great line that Frank Miller says, it's like, all the parents were so worried about comic books, they were just in denial that they were just being rotten parents, and that's really
that
true,
hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's like, so, I mean, it's important, and it's an important part of the history of comic books. And the movie, I didn't want to be just a history lesson, but I felt that people needed to kind of know, get a little bit of background. I mean, some people who are really know comic books, they don't need to know all that. They already do, but a lot of us don't. And so when you're learning about the history, there's a few important parts of it. The Golden Age, the Silver Age, the late 80s, early 90s with the independent publishers. Image, Watchmen was huge. There was all these things happening that really changed comics. The Frank Miller Batman. There was a lot of these things happening. Dark Horse. So that part is really important, about, these publishers and these artists. They just kept moving forward. And that's what you have to do.
Once again, we are joined here by Michael Valentine from the movie Comix Beyond the Comic Book Pages. That is now available on his website, comicsthemovie.com. That's comics spelled Comix, which the DVD has over 4 hours of bonus footage, which you need to check out, which I need to check out. So I need to go watch it again and purchase it on the website.
That's my weekend
let's finish
plans.
up Chest Day, guys. I know Brian has a final question for you, and so does Jeff. So Brian, kick it off. Let's finish up this, and we'll have Michael do some fun with us after that.
All right. Well, I'm going to start the fun off now. Michael, obviously you did a ton of research. What?
I said it's been fun since we've been on.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, no, we're taking it up a notch, all right?
Yeah.
If we're not careful, my shirt may come off.
Easy.
All right.
Yes.
That's a notch.
Yeah. Michael, obviously you did a ton of research into comic books and the history of comic books and just what comic books are from start to finish while making this film. With the new craze being superhero movies, I want to know, do you think the big time studios are doing comic books justice? Bringing in Batman versus Superman or the newest Doctor Strange, the Avengers, things like that. Do you think they're doing these comic books justice, or are they just in it trying to make big dollar bills?
Well, it's funny. I think that comic movies have gotten a lot better. I really do. I think that because most of the people who are behind the scenes creating them, you got Joss Whedon and you got people who really are comic book fans making the movies.
Yeah.
So, and I think, a lot's on the line for these characters. So I think it's really important that these directors in the studios really pay attention to the stories and the details. So I would say overall, I think they're doing a really good job. Now, obviously, there's going to be movies that are hit or miss, or, if you're really into comic books, you may go, oh, that storyline wasn't correct, or they did something here. But, I mean, for the entertainment value, I think it's great. I wasn't a huge fan of the Batman versus Superman movie. It was really well done, but it wasn't, I don't know. But again, it's just an opinion,
Yeah, exactly, yes.
It's I like the last X-Men movies. I've loved Days of Future Past. It's always been one of my favorite storylines.
So
Chris
good.
Claremont's storyline, and I think they did a really good job with it. So, to answer your question, I think overall they're doing a good job. They're doing much better because if you look at the earliest comic book movies, okay, probably Superman was one of the earliest ones, right?
Yeah, Christopher
I,
Reeves.
I still love those movies, but the guys who are making them really weren't into comic books, so they really were just kind of like flying up the seat of their pants making these movies. And that's why some of those movies are good and some of them are kind of The first few Batman movies, they're okay. I don't know if they really resonate with me now.
And you're talking about Keaton, right? Not Nolan?
Yeah, the Keaton ones. And whoever else was the
And then they got drastically better once we had Batman versus Superman. Batman and Robin.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
We did a movie commentary on that. We were pretty drunk, and it got pretty, especially for me being a DC fan, I didn't want to relive that again ever, but I had to. So, but with Batman vs Superman, I just want to kind of dive into that a little bit because I personally loved it, and especially since you interviewed Frank Miller. I just loved it because a lot of it was page for page off The Dark Knight Returns and The Death of Superman. What one thing do you not like about it? Because if you say like Lex Luthor or something, I understand that. What was the one thing you took from it that you were just...
You had to take it here, Geiger.
He brought it up? I'm sorry,
It's all my fault.
He acts like it's his child. Like, what didn't you like about him, his performance?
No, I'm interested because there was parts of it that I didn't like. I will never say it on air because I'm the DC guy. And there's stuff about Marvel movies I don't like. But I was just interested.
Well, I think, again, it's like, if you're the casual fan, you're probably going to watch the movies and be, oh, that was really cool. The effects were cool. Yeah. And I think there was a lot of good things about that movie. I think, Lex Luthor, yes, that was a problem I had. I also, I don't know. I think that, Ben Affleck did a good job. I'm not a big fan of the guy who played Superman. I'm just not. I think that's part of it.
Geiger. I told you.
I can believe that for sure.
And the other problem I have with Superman is now they want to make Superman dark, and it's like, you know what? Why can't we have a comic book character that's not dark? I mean, one thing that Mark Waid, who did a lot of, he had a lot of contribution on the Superman franchise over the years. He said that as we get older and the new kids, they want stuff that's a little more darker, and that's what they're drawn to, and I get it. But I mean, I think Superman, he represents good, and and I think that's was part of my issue with Superman is they're trying to make him dark like Batman. It's like, no, make him, what he was originally made to be, a do-gooder. It's okay. I mean, you have to have the balance there,
And coming from a Frank Miller guy, we like dark stuff, and coming from, the older school, they like light stuff. So, Jeff, I know you have a final question for him, so go ahead.
Well, first off, Michael, I'm glad you brought that up because I thought one of the coolest lines in the documentary was the dichotomy between, I can't remember who said it, I apologize, but between Superman and Batman, how Superman is the most powerful hero, and Batman is the least powerful hero. And that's the beauty of comic books, is we're able to enjoy stories with both of these, and then they can even mesh their worlds a lot of times.
Yep, that was Neil Adams who said that.
That was such a great line.
Yeah.
But one thing kind of tying into that I just wanted to ask, as someone who's spoken to some of the best creative minds around comics ever, is we've seen so many things in pop culture, music, movies, even like celebrities and books that have come and gone. But it seems to me that not only have comic book characters and these stories stood around for the over half of a century, I feel like they've gotten even more popular in the last 2 decades. What do you think it is about comic books, and specifically these characters, that resonate so much with multiple generations, and why it's getting even more popular now, I feel like, than it was 30, 40 years ago?
God, that's a really good question. I think part of it is the characters themselves, and I mean, a character like Batman has been around for so long, so people our age love them, are going to go to the movies, and then if we have kids, we're going to take them to the movies, right? Because we grew up loving Batman, and then our parents probably loved Batman and Superman early on. But I think especially with the Marvel stuff, and Superman, because he's so iconic to me. You think of a character that represents good and everything. Superman is the guy. And he's got, and then Batman, again, he's on the other side of that. So people can relate to all those things. And there's darkness and there's light in all of our lives. And so these characters represent a lot of it, part of what we are. And so you have like Stan, when he creates his characters, he wants them to be like characters that you could believe. Like there's a great line where he's talking about creating his characters, and you have to be able to believe that a character could get a toothache, that has to go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? It's like those kinds of things, and those are the things like with Spider-Man and with Peter Parker, they were human. You know what I mean? And like I think that a lot of those things are things that we can relate to, and that things that we can relate to, then our kids can relate to. So I think for those characters, I think that's one of the reasons why, and the comics have been really good. I mean, yes, there's been some hit or misses over the years with Batman, with Superman, but I mean, I think overall the comic books have stayed really true to a lot of these. Even when Batman goes a little bit darker, I mean, I like Killing Joke. I mean, I really love Joker. He's one of my favorite characters because he's so twisted and like you want to love him though. You know what I mean? Like there's something about and it's like that's a bad guy, and it's one of my favorites. So again, there's something in him that I can relate to. So going back to your question, I think that to me is one of the keys. Is that these characters have things. I mean, Batman lost his parents. I mean, maybe most of us don't understand that, but we can relate to someone who goes through a hardship like that, and how it could make them such a twisted, person. Seeing that right in front of them,
Yeah.
Michael, I hate you so much. We have to move on to Protein Shake because I want to ask you 80 million questions about the Joker, but I'm going to pull back my DC reins and throw it to Jeff because we have to go to our next topic. So, Jeff, take it from me before I say anything else.
All right, guys. As you know, the second part of our show is always our Protein Shake, where we just address some quick news topics from this week. It was a pretty light week in terms of news. This is kind of that dead period between the holiday movie season and then when the summer comes. So we only have one thing we're going to talk about this week, and it was announced by Fox and actually Simon Kinberg, who's kind of running their operations over there regarding all their Marvel properties. It was announced that after Hugh Jackman's swan song as Wolverine in Logan next summer, which I know we're all going to be crying like the grown men that we're not ashamed to be at that film, Fox is going to reconfigure their X-Men universe, focusing solely on Deadpool and then the Josh Boone-directed New Mutants. So the question that we want to specifically ask Michael, because he knows the comic history so well and these characters and these creators, is we're going to see a, for lack of a better term, reconfigured or rebooted X-Men universe. I know we've all gone back and forth many times about how the continuity is an absolute mess. It's basically a soap opera.
Look, if we've got 45 minutes, I can explain it to you.
Well, we do not even close to that.
Yeah, we don't. Sorry. I decided that we're not going to do this podcast in the next 5 years, so we don't have time for you to explain how X-Men is connected. So.
But guys, what we really want to know is if Fox is soft rebooting the X-Men, what do we want to see from them? Because I feel like all the main comic arcs, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, I guess you could say they did Dark Phoenix, but not really, not in a good way. Like, is there anything that's left out there that we still want to see that they could maybe do to win us over? And Michael, if you have one in mind, love for you to go first. Otherwise, we can kind of stall and try and make Fox look good for a few minutes.
Well, you mentioned Dark Phoenix. I think, that would be really cool. I think, again, they've done a lot with that, and this is why I go back to the independent creators, because eventually what else is left to do with X-Men? How many times can you relaunch these, some you can, but I think you get to a point where you kind of just have to, let it go, and we'll see. I mean, I really liked what they did in the last couple X-Men movies. I really did. And they were able to kind of put new people in those characters, make them younger, and it worked. I wish they would continue with those guys because I really like those movies. So again, I'm optimistic because they do really good with these films, but on the other side of it, coming from being a comic book fan, it's like, well, you've done a lot already. So what are you really going to do? What's left?
Right. That's what I was wondering. Banner, you're our Fox guy and the big X-Men fan on the pod. What do you think?
I'm just trying to keep my head above water here. All right. Look, after Logan,
Deadpool and Logan looks good. You're actually not doing that bad.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, but here's the question: we don't have a whole lot after that. We have Deadpool, which was awesome.
Everyone's jumping ship right now, but
yeah. Now we have Logan, which looks fantastic. But after that, New Mutants looks like it's getting close, and then we're already looking towards Deadpool 3 when Deadpool 2 has taken some huge hits here in the recent times. We've lost the 50% of the creative force behind Deadpool. We have now lost for Deadpool 2, and we're already looking for Deadpool 3, which it's rumored it's going to be Black Ops X-Force, which I think will be really cool. But we got to kind of get our shit together for Deadpool 2 before we start looking at Deadpool 3. As far as they're talking about a soft reboot, I'm super afraid that we're going to get what happened with Fantastic Four, where they go, hey, we did one movie which was kind of okay, and then we did Rise of the Silver Surfer, which we're not even going to get into my opinion about that. Then we have the Fantastic Four 2015 reboot, which was fantastic for 45 minutes, and then I don't know what I was watching for the next 45 minutes. And I'm really afraid that they're going to do that with the X-Men. Now, there's also been talks about, let's do kind of a Spider-Man Sony thing where we can give creative rights back to Marvel/Disney. I think that's going to hurt the genre as a whole and hurt the X-Men as a whole because there's not going to be any competitiveness. You're going to have one studio with all their creative power now going against, no offense, Geiger, but DC and Warner Brothers, which isn't really a contest at this point in time. And it's going to make everything kind of stagnant and stale where you really need Fox to be another strong force. Even if they're third in line behind Warner Brothers and Marvel, you have to have that strong force to keep everybody else on their toes. I think they've got something. If they keep things rated R, they could kind of go with that. If they keep it, you could either go raunchy like they did with Deadpool, or you can go super dark, which it looks and appears like they're going with Logan. But I don't even know where I'm going now. I'm just talking because
I love Fox, and it's not just because they make Warner Brothers look great because we need all the help we can get, but I also love them because on a previous pod I've said that they didn't start it all. I really felt that the first Batman with Michael Keaton kind of started it all. I know Superman did stuff, but they started it all in 2000 for everything that's happening right now, and I think they're starting it all again with these rated R flicks. But I want to answer your question, Jeff, with one word, and that's time. We saw how much time mattered in Doctor Strange, and time matters in the real world too. Batman reboot was so good because it was for what from 96 to 2004-ish. You can't mess with time, but if you reboot Spider-Man after we just had an origin story, then you throw the kid from The Social Network in there 8 years later, that's not enough time.
You know his name.
It's not enough time to reboot X-Men. There's not enough time. You're just throwing a Logan movie at us that I myself, and it seems like everyone else, is very excited to see, but there's not enough time to reboot this right now. And to touch off Michael's point, And I feel like this too, coming from someone who's a DC fan but love the X-Men, they're my number one Marvel comic, all the greatest storylines I felt that were already done were done pretty well in the movies. So how are you going to redo them and make them better?
Yep.
Can I say something real quick here, too?
Yes,
please.
I think what makes the Marvel movies work is they take time to develop the characters. Like, they don't just try to throw everything at you at one time. So, you started with Iron Man with the Avengers, which will take Avengers because pretty much every Marvel character it could be considered an Avenger. So, they start with Iron Man, and they start bringing these characters in one at a time. They get their own movies, and they slowly have this story where they're going to create the Avengers. I mean, Ant-Man. No one knew who Ant-Man was.
Right.
But Marvel was able to make a really good film on Ant-Man, right? And really, even Iron Man. I mean, Iron Man was pretty popular, but he wasn't like one of the top.
Mainstream.
Yeah, he wasn't even.
Michael, I went to a comic book store the other day, and this old man told me who's been reading comics since the 50s, said Iron Man is a B- character, but after the movie, everyone thinks he's a mainstream, which is a very good point because he wasn't one of Marvel's mainstream at all until the movie came.
Right, so Marvel was able to make him like a mainstream character. And again, I think the key for the films, too, is getting a good actor to play the character. I mean, I think Robert Downey was one of the, they kind of set a trend with finding the right people to fill the role. Because, I mean, they could have got someone else to play Tony Stark, but, I mean, getting him to play Tony Stark was brilliant.
And he eats, breathes, and lives Tony Stark.
He totally does, and we love it. We want to watch that, And so I think with Marvel, what they've been able to do is they've been able to create this universe to where after every movie we're waiting for the credits. We're waiting to the end of the credits to see what's coming next.
Oh, yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy. I love that movie. I mean, they're going to bring all these characters in and out of the other movies, and I think that what Warner Brothers and DC kind of are hopefully starting to get is that they need to kind of do the same thing. And I think with some of the shows, they're doing The Flash and Arrow. They're kind of trying to do that, I think. They're trying to do it from a different angle and saying, okay, Green Arrow was not a really big character either, but, what has DC got after Superman and Batman? They've got to go to these characters, Flash and things like that, which were great comics and characters. I love them. But how do you kind of bring them in to make them popular? And I think that Marvel has a good way of doing it.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And I hate them for it because they make us look terrible.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, some of the DC movies, no offense, but some of the DC movies have not been that good, And I think
I've said that the only thing that Warner Brothers has ever gotten right is Batman.
Yeah.
Ever.
And the thing is, with Warner Brothers, once you take Batman, Superman out of the equation, where are you? That's their main two. With Marvel, they've got Iron Man, they've got Thor, they've got Captain America, and then they've got all the other Rogue, and then they've got, Ant-Man and all these other characters that they're making feature films out of that are doing really well.
Yeah.
They got an Ant-Man and Doctor Strange movie right. Now take a step back and just realize how hard that is to do. And they got it perfect. I love
Doctor Strange.
I love Marvel films. I do. I love Marvel.
Well, and then on top of that,
I love Marvel Netflix. I love Marvel Netflix.
Did you guys like Doctor Strange?
We did.
Absolutely. I love Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
We did movie reviews on that. It was fantastic. It was
fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Again, I think they got the right actor. They made sure they stuck to the origin and it looked good. And I think everybody who's a Doctor Strange fan. And the thing is, I mean, Doctor Strange, most people, again, we're comic book fans, so obviously we know the character, but a lot of people don't, but they've been able to take these characters, and that's the thing that I don't think DC's been able to do, is take these lesser known characters and create great movies that make a lot of money. And they're slowly building this empire by doing that.
Yeah.
Jeff,
I think that's a great. Oh, go ahead, Geiger.
Sorry, before we get on the DC question, and Banner has something to say. I just want to say, imagine DC fans, if you get taken away through bankruptcy, Batman, Superman, and just say The Flash, and you have to try to make movies. That's what happened to Marvel. They got taken away Spider-Man, they got taken away X-Men, they got taken away the Fantastic Four, they got Spider-Man back way in the future. But they were able to not only make movies but kick everyone else's ass in the process. It's very I have to tip my hat to them. They're fantastic. It just upsets me because I feel like we have better characters, but Warner Brothers doesn't do me justice. That's why I'm upset every time I go to a movie. Sorry, Banner, go ahead.
I was going to say, on that, Banner,
I don't remember.
Banner, do you just want to take us home? I know we're running a little short on time, but we do have a few Twitter questions for Michael about his movie from our fans out there.
Yeah, let's do it. Because to be honest with you, I don't remember what I was gonna say because I've been drinking. Let's be honest with ourselves. That's what we do here on the Bro Force Squad.
These are the things that we don't edit out because.
Tell me that for next time. I'm gonna have to make sure I'm
for sure.
Got some.
Michael, I feel like
we can fill these questions while you go get a drink. Trust me.
All right, Banner. I
feel like Michael, you got to be a guest host whenever we bring out our bracket. Come January time.
Yeah. We're doing a 64 comics movie March Madness.
Oh, nice.
So we've actually been working on it for a few months. All the fans, this is brand new to you guys too. We've taken 64 comic book movies and we have ranked them, put them in a bracket, and we're basically going to come on here and debate them to where we get the best comic book movie to date. And
I hope my film's in there.
It'd be too easy to win. We can't have it.
Now it's the number one seed.
Yeah.
Look, we need this to be competitive. We can't just have you running the table on everybody.
Because we'd have you on to vote.
All
right, guys. So this is our time where we get to interact with you guys. Again, we posted on our Twitter and on our Facebook questions for Michael that you guys want answered. In our section, Do You Even Lift, Brah? And our first question comes from Facebook. This is from Shalana. And this is for you, Michael. And,
hi, Shalana.
And Shalana asked, oh, hey, that was her. I didn't realize she was on. Shalana asked, while you're filming the movie, who were you most excited to interview, and who was the most difficult interview to secure?
Well, that's a great question. And, you know, it was a dream come true to be able to interview all these people. I mean, I look at the film now and I'm like, I never would have thought I would have been able to get, you know, Stan Lee and Frank Miller and Neil Adams and Mark Waid and Mark Silvestri, one of the Image founders, and Mark Waid and Steve Niles and Mike Richardson. I mean, you know, and Todd McFarlane and the list goes on. And so I'm very fortunate and thankful for them, and they were all really great. So it's really tough for me to say who's my favorite, but, oh, man, I think hands down it was Stan Lee.
You got to, man.
No, it has to be.
Right?
I think everybody disappointed if it wasn't.
I'm DC, and I got to say that. That was awesome.
I mean, you know, I was like a kid in a candy store, man. I mean, I'm like, you know, not only am I sitting in a room with him and just like, you know, like 3 or 4 feet from him, you know, but he's just talking about all this great stuff. In fact, again, in the DVD, if you guys out there are interested, I wanted to make something. We were talking about earlier about comic books being something you want to hold and read. The DVD, the reason I made that special is because I felt the same way about the DVD. And the DVD has 4 hours of bonus footage. You get the whole Stan Lee interview I did on there. You get the whole Frank Miller interview I did.
That's worth it right there.
Okay, yeah.
So, but yeah, I'd have to say hands down Stan Lee. I mean, you know, he's like Elvis of comic books, you know? I
could watch Stan Lee read the Cheesecake Factory menu and be entertained.
Totally. And, you know, it's like, you know, the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself 2 things. I'm trying to stay on topic, obviously, right. But my brain's just kind of wandering. Like sometimes I would lose kind of, you know, my mind would start going kind of weird because I'd be thinking, oh my God, I'm sitting here and Stanley's talking to me right now, and I'm outside of myself going, my God, is this real? Yeah. And then when I'm hearing him talk about like all this great stuff, I'm like, oh my God, people are gonna love this, and that was the turning point for me that I knew that I had to do this film. Because up to that point, I was like, am I doing this? Am I doing something that people are going to like? And then when I heard, you know, I got his interview. So going back to her question, and thank you, it's a great question, Stan Lee, hands down.
That's awesome.
So I'm glad you answered it that way because that's what I thought you would. But what was the most difficult to secure? Because that was the part of the question I was wondering. Was there some guys or girls that you had to track down like 8 times before they finally were like, cool, man, I'll give you 10 minutes?
Yeah, it sounds like from your interview, it sounds like Neil Adams was really, really hard.
Yeah, he seems like a guy that'd be like, I don't want
and you just like waltz right in, or like, hey man, I'm filming this movie. Will you hook me up?
Well, part of it is like not taking no for an answer sometimes. You know,
it's all sales. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I think what happens is they see that you're passionate about something. Like they were. They see themselves in you, like when they were young, right? So they're going, okay, this kid, this is his first film, but he's really passionate and he wants to hear my story, And for most of them, that's all I really needed, to show that, I just want you to talk about, Neil Adams. I just want to talk to you about your, how much, how important you were to this phenomenon, and especially with Batman. A lot of people don't realize that Frank Miller's Batman is influenced by Neil's Batman, because up to the 70s, Batman was kind of like, wasn't really dark.
Yeah.
And if you look at Neil Adams' Batman, it's pretty dark, like his visuals. And that's what inspired Frank's Batman. So, again, it's just being persistent and passionate. To answer your question, the hardest one was Frank. Frank.
I can believe that.
Yeah, because Frank, he doesn't, even to this day, I mean, back then he didn't do any, but to this day he doesn't really do much interviews.
Yeah.
And, when you see Frank on film and you see that look, that
sword he was swinging around in his office, that was
my
awesome.
God,
An intimidating fellow whenever I was watching it. I was like, man,
oh my God,
dude. Questions.
That's a whole story in itself. So, yeah, it took me a few months to get Frank. In fact, long story short is right at the end, right when I was ready to fly, because we flew out to Manhattan for one day. We had one day to go there and to shoot it. And on that day, I had already gotten the plane tickets. I had already taken off work. I called in sick, and my DP called in sick, and so we're ready to go. And Frank's assistant calls me and says, Frank, he can't do it. And, sometimes in life you get one opportunity, and if you wait and you kind of go, well, we'll try again later, you may never get that opportunity. And so I just told her, the lady's name was Hildy, and I said, Hildy, please talk to him. I said, we're already ready to fly out there. And she goes, okay, let me talk to him. She talked to him. Frank comes back. He said, okay. We fly out there, and we get there, and then she goes, okay, Frank only has like 10 minutes. He's got like all these meetings. And I'm like, shit. I'm like, but 10 minutes is better than no minutes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
I'm freaking out going, okay, what questions am I going to ask? I have all these questions, all these things I want to talk to him about. Now I got 10 minutes. But the one thing I learned is that when you get them talking, they love talking about what they love and things that they've done. So once I got Frank started, then I got over an hour, almost an hour and a half with him on camera.
That's so awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And you see the little knife he has in his hand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great part, and it's in the bonus footage, where this question I asked, I didn't make the film, and I go, because I had heard people say that comic books are a way of escapism. I had heard that from people I had interviewed previously. And so I asked Frank what he thought about that. And Frank, and again, I never met Frank. So I'm in New York. I'm 3,000 miles away from home. I'm in his studio, and he gets up, and he puts that smirk on like, I don't like that question. And he gets up out of his chair, and he grabs the knife, and he starts swirling it around, looks at me. He's like, I don't like that term. I don't like escapism. And I'm like, holy shit, he's gonna cut me.
Whatever you want, man.
And you only have in 10 minutes. I just want to let all the Fifth Chair fans know out there that Frank Miller is in this movie a lot. Michael didn't Jared Leto him out. So can you tell I'm bitter, Michael? I'm sorry. This is the world I live in. Brian, we got one more Twitter question before we got to sign off. So let's. All
right. We got one more. This one comes from Twitter. Michael, again, this one's for you. It comes from Parker's Peter. All righty.
Do you get it?
Parker's Peter.
That's a really cool Twitter handle.
It's very clever. Parker's Peter says, with your background in comic books, what do you think the best and worst adaptations were from the page to the screen, including movies, shows, the Netflix series? kind of anything that was a comic and is now in some sort of cinema?
Oh my God, that's a really hard question because I'll start with what I really liked. I really liked, like Sin City. I was a huge fan of Sin City. I felt that, to me, kind of really got the comic book movie right, because it looks like a comic book. It looks like Sin City.
Oh,
it's
100%.
shot that way. The angles, the way it's lit, it's brilliant. And the dialogue is just, to me, it really captures. It's not a superhero movie, but it's one of my favorites because of the characters. I love the characters. I love the subplots, and I really like how it looks. It really looks like the comic book. And I think a lot of comic book movies, they're very slick, and they don't really look like the book. And so Frank and Robert Rodriguez were really, it was really important for them to kind of get that right. And that's one of my favorites. I mean, I have so many favorites, but that's definitely probably one of my all-time favorites. As far as one of my all-time worst, the Fantastic Four movies, they were okay. I think Daredevil was probably one of my least favorites.
Definitely a 16 seed. Definitely
a 16 seed in our tournament.
No offense to Ben Affleck and all that, but it just, I don't know. But some people like it, so figure. And I didn't like Batman and Robin at all. In fact,
no redeeming qualities.
It's a play-in game. It's on the play-in game. It didn't even make the bracket. It's going against, I believe, Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. So it's going to be a battle on who actually makes the tournament.
Just when they were filming that, they had to know it was going to be terrible.
Yeah, everyone's just there to get a paycheck.
Being the homer I am, I think one of the greatest movies ever is The Dark Knight. But after I saw Daredevil Season 1 on Netflix, I don't know, man. That's one of the greatest origins. And Daredevil Season 2 is fantastic, too. But Daredevil Season 1, the way they told that story, I love a slow cook. Don't hurry up my origin story. Don't let him put on the suit till episode 10. I thought that was
Don't tell
perfect.
me.
From a studio that does a lot of perfect things, Marvel, I thought that was perfect. Their Netflix shows, man, they're knocking it out of the park. I love every episode I see.
I would agree with that, and I think because they are spending the time. I mean, they didn't do that with the Daredevil movie because they needed to rush everything. And then It's like Watchmen. Watchmen is, to me, one of the greatest comic book stories of all time. Alan Moore is one of the best creators, writers ever in comic books, in my opinion. In fact, he was one of the persons I really wanted in the film. But I think I like the movie a lot, but I think that story is so complex that they tried to put so much in there that if someone doesn't know the comic book, they're going to watch and go, wait a minute, I'm a little confused. So to me, they should have taken more time on that.
Yeah.
Myself.
I knew the comic, and I was still kind of confused watching it. It was, I liked it, but didn't on stuff. So, all right, guys, anything else before I take us home?
I'm good.
No, I just want to say thank you to you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Well, thank you guys, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the film. And if you enjoyed it, that made what I do, worthwhile for sure.
All right, that'll do us for us. We would like to thank our guest, Michael Valentine. Go check out his movie, Comics Beyond the Comic Book Pages. His website is comicsthemovie.com. The first comic is spelled COMIX. Buy the DVD, over 4 hours of extras, including the entire Stan Lee and Frank Miller interview. All that can be found on his website, Amazon, a lot of other stuff that you can find on the internet. To get all your fill on everything comic book movie related, you all know where to go, broforcesquad.com. There you can find and subscribe to our blog. Tweet at us at broforcesquad. Give us a like on Facebook. Subscribe to us on our YouTube and iTunes channels. And get ready, next month will be all things Star Wars. And coming up in the new year, we have, as Banner said, a 64-movie March Madness tournament to see what comic book movie is the best in the land. Until then, we will catch you guys later.